of restricting access to forex. That's the only way we can conserve foreign exchange, as it were.
All right, Professor Waleke, thank you very much. I'm just saying, still on the issue of the right timing for the removal of subsidy on refined petroleum products. Let me pose this to Niyi Akinseju. Part of what we hear in terms of the subsidy being provided, usually two arguments. One, we don't have enough local refining capacity. We had heard in the past that the NNPC was going to fix its 4 refineries sometime this year. The initial target was for the first quarter of this year. First quarter is coming to a close now. There's been no news out of NNPC as to what a state of readiness is, to get the 4 refineries back to full production capacity or near full optimal production capacity. So perhaps it might be later in the year. But we also heard, repeatedly over the years, that the reason why we are paying so much on subsidies, that take a look at the prices of the oil market on the international scene. That you find when oil prices rise, it means that government has to absorb part of the shock. Now, is there a possibility of a set-off now that oil prices are going down, which means that the refineries that are picking up these oil prices, even though those prices relate to futures, that are picking up those prices, the cost for us for importation to bridge whatever supply domestic gap that we have could also then narrow our subsidy outlay on fuel importation or fuel supplies in general. And if that narrows down, then perhaps we might not need to scratch our heads too much in terms of where additional financing might come from.
Well, that's a reality. But fuel, PMS especially, is a political product. And we have to accept that reality. And we also have a president that is very public sensitive, to matters of possible increase in the price of fuel. 2 or 3 days ago, we were talking of crude oil price under $30. Effectively, at the point in time, it went to as low as $27. Less than 48 hours after, we're talking of 38, It is also possible that we'll be talking of $40, $45 in the next 3 or 4 days. It's possible, and it could also fall too. So that also defines the nature, of our subsidy. The reality in truth is that with the fall of the decline in price, as it were, the subsidy, threshold would narrow. It would also allow opportunity, to also remove subsidy in the real sense of it. But being a political product, we need to extend our consideration, beyond that. If the Nigerian people, especially as represented by the labor movement and all that, if there is anything that is so touchy, with them, it is this product, But I think we can also overextend our thoughts beyond the subsidy. We have joint venture partnership that has also developed a lot of high evaluation over time. Though at this time, the evaluation, of course, will also be moderated because of the nature of the market. But I think the federal government had given consideration to it at a point in time, I think 2018 or so, that it will be reviewing the possibility of selling off a certain percentage of our holdings, in these joint ventures. And for me, I am also looking at the opportunities provided by the electric power distribution companies. We still have some 40% holdings, lying idle, belonging to the federal government in those companies, the discos, as it were. I think a sell-off of those holdings too would provide some backup too. Between these two, and of course the loan we are expecting from the multilateral agencies, from even the international capital markets,
yes,
will still help us to to mitigate whatever would be the shortcomings in the supply of foreign
I'm just
exchange.
wondering, Kyria, because earlier this year, when the talk about the utilization of the proposed loan as it then was, before the National Assembly, of course, the Senate has already passed it, we had the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning on Good Morning Nigeria, and she did say that the facility, it's a bouquet of loans involving not just the federal government, but also some of the subnational entities. That's one. And that the budget, and that the loan wasn't intended to finance the 2020 appropriation. Yeah. And that these are for long-term, projects. So how do we understand all of this now? Is it that we should proceed with this? Because these are soft loans, as it were, with long-term, repayment periods. Should that be factored in at all in terms of our consideration of how to deal with, shall we say, the short-term and even medium-term shocks of coronavirus? Who takes this?
I think so, because what we need now is liquidity. As I said, we are not under any threat in terms of financing our imports, as it were. But what the issue will be reduction in reserve accumulation. And that, of course, also provides confidence issue for our investors, either local or foreign investors. So we now need to have a straight channeling of dollars, foreign exchange, into our foreign reserve. So if it's through these multilateral agencies, because the one for the China Exim Bank will be coming in terms of project delivery. We may not be taking cash, directly, but we'll be having investment in cash, about 5 billion worth of it from AFDB, World Bank, and KFW and all that, even if it's for long term, there is an entry point. This is the entry point that we so desire this funding, as it were.
Well, gentlemen, I think there are two issues that are very contentious in what we have been discussing and which we seems to relegate to the background. The issue of subsidy is a recurring decimal as far as Nigerian economic management is concerned. There will continue to be subsidy on petroleum products in as much as two scenarios hold. Number one, in as much as we cannot produce domestically enough petroleum products to satisfy our need, there will continue to be subsidy. Whatever you remove, it will come back, because we are operating a flexible exchange rate regime. And that exchange rate regime responds to global economic challenges and domestic economic challenges. So wherever the value of Naira falls relative to dollar, and in as much as we are importing petroleum products, whatever subsidy you remove, there will be another recurring subsidy emerging based on the differential between the earlier cost.
Professor Dama, you have just said it all.
Yes.
If we want to go to Lagos because of time, it's of essence here now. Because if you continue to import a fuel, removal of subsidy is going to be a dream. It cannot work practically. Whatever loan that we are attracting, soft or for long-term projects or whatever you have, it would never work. Because we have been discussing this on this program for years now. All right, so let us drift from this issue of subsidy. Let's go to Lagos and get Johnson Chukwu to also come in here. Johnson, you've listened to the last submission by Akin Siju here, and I want to also look at the issue of PMS, which he said is a political product. Of course, its price is determined by world market forces, so we don't have even control over that. Just the fact that Russia and Saudi Arabia are having issues concerning fuel is affecting the global oil market, and we are feeling it because of our mono nature of our economy. Now, you have heard that there is a committee set up by the president to look at how we can not just insulate ourselves from the consequences of coronavirus, but to see how we can have an internally generated mechanism that can enable us to survive economically within this period of coronavirus attack to the entire world. What is your take? What would you be telling the committee to do? Or if you're a member of that committee, what will be your own contribution towards ensuring that we get out of this issue based on our own internally generated plans and policies that are implementable?
Let me start by making a little more contribution on the subsidy issue. Then I'll come back to your second part of your question. The professor from University of Abuja said that unless we have a flexible exchange rate, we may not be able to take our subsidy because the subsidy will come back as forex subsidy. I beg to disagree, and I also beg to disagree on the fact that PMS or fuel is a political product. Today, Nigeria is the only country in the entire West Africa that is subsidizing fuel. And let me remind us, a couple of years back, maybe 4 or 5 years back, kerosene, or what they call DPK, dual purpose kerosene, was considered as the most...
This is the network service of the NTA. We now join our outside broadcast crew for a live telecast. Please stay tuned.
Nigeria first. I see the CEO of Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, Mr. Uche Oji. This is a time when we need to collaborate together and truly think about Nigeria. We thank you for what you've done so far, but I think a lot of work needs to be done. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you to this second consultative Going for Growth Roundtable session. In June 2019, the Central Bank of Nigeria participated in the first roundtable session where I had the opportunity to share my thoughts on the economy as well as receive inputs from key private sector participants in Lagos on ways in which we could promote greater economic growth for our country. I note with delight that some of the recommendations at the first session have been implemented by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and these have contributed to the successes we have recorded in improving access to credit for Nigerians in 2019. Following the success of the first session, the management of the Central Bank of Nigeria decided to convene a second session in Abuja, working in partnership with key stakeholders in the public sector. And I say this is the real time to hold this, and like we all know what is happening today in the world. I therefore have no doubt in my mind that with the caliber of people from both the public and private sector gathered here today, we will make the desired progress in generating ideas and solutions that will enable greater growth and development of our dear country. This session is more relevant today than ever before, given the external headwinds that the Nigerian economy faces, such as the effects of the trade and technology wars, and more importantly, the recent, indeed current spread of coronavirus, which has emerged as a major threat to global growth in 2020 and perhaps beyond. The impact of the coronavirus across over 100 countries has affected global supply chains as well as demand for goods and services. Commodity prices have also been affected as crude oil prices have plummeted by over 45% since January 2020. Early this year, the IMF had projected that global growth would rise to 3.3% in 2020, up from 2.9% in 2019. However, with the onset of the virus, global growth is now expected to decline in 2020, but the extent of the decline will depend on how the epidemic is contained over the coming months. Central banks in key markets across the globe have responded by reducing policy rates in order to stimulate growth, while measures are being taken by fiscal authorities to build resilient buffers to contain the spread of the virus. But again, let me assure all of us as Nigerians that only 2 days ago, President Muhammadu Buhari constituted a committee headed by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning to carry out an assessment of the impact not just of the coronavirus but also of the trade wars on Nigeria and profile a solution. But I want to assure all of us as Nigerians that in the coming days, both the monetary and the fiscal authorities will come together and we will bring out to Nigerians and the world our own recipe of solutions to these problems. The central bank, fortunately, had already embarked on similar measures, which has resulted in significant reduction in lending rates as part of our efforts to boost growth. Working with the fiscal authorities, we will not hesitate to deploy additional measures to strengthen our buffers and insulate the Nigerian economy from the global headwinds. As a background, in the last 3 years, the Nigerian economy had remained on a positive growth path. GDP growth has remained in positive territory for the 11th consecutive quarter, following the 2016-2017 economic recession. During the fourth quarter of 2019, GDP growth stood at 2.55%, which is the highest rate of quarterly growth attained since 2016, surpassing the expectation of several analysts who had predicted a 2.2% growth. For the year 2019, GDP growth stood at 2.27% relative to the negative 1.6% in 2016, highlighting the impact of fiscal and monetary policy measures that have helped support growth in critical sectors of the Nigerian economy, such as agriculture, industry, oil and gas, and ICT. One of the critical measures that helped to boost growth in 2019 was the impact of the Central Bank of Nigeria's minimum loan-to-deposit ratio, which was initially at 60% and subsequently raised to 65%. We also imposed restrictions on access to open market operation auctions in order to encourage banks to lend to the real sector. Indeed, the banking sector has responded positively with the rise in aggregate industry credit from 15.3 trillion in May 2019 to over 17.2 trillion in January 2020. I'm aware that these loans have been granted to borrowers across different sectors at considerably lower rates. Although a lot more still needs to be done, we intend to sustain these policy measures as it will help support improved economic growth and create more employment opportunities in Nigeria. Some risks. Notwithstanding our current measures aimed at supporting growth, our economy faces considerable challenges. GDP growth remains below our national population growth rate at 2.6%. Second, our reliance on crude oil for more than 80% of our foreign exchange earnings and 60% of government revenues means our economy is exposed to the impacts of the coronavirus and crude oil shock. Projected declines in revenues, as occasioned by the drop in crude oil prices, constrain the government's ability to meet its infrastructure commitments in 2020, which is vital if we are to achieve double-digit growth. Given this challenge, it is imperative that this roundtable session comes up with well-structured funding models that will mobilize funds from banks and our development finance institutions and other financial institutions to fund critical infrastructure projects while providing attractive returns to investors. We must also use this opportunity to consider funding for infrastructure projects that improve access to market for farmers and SMEs, while also connecting the railways to our ports in order to increase our non-oil exports. Such schemes will support greater economic growth and help free up funds for the government to focus on other important priorities. On our part at the Central Bank of Nigeria, yes, it is true that in the last 2-3 years we have been focused aggressively on agriculture, primary agriculture, and a few select industries in the manufacturing sector. What we put on the table is that we will extend our intervention to areas like logistics. A large problem of the problem that we have today is delivering our food from farm to markets. We'll be looking at intervening in whatever needs to be done to move food and food products from farm to market. We will be intervening in areas that will help in improving processing of foods from just primary agricultural products even into primary sectors. Given the impact, I hear that given the impact of coronavirus, I hear some countries are even deciding that they will ban the export of even pharmaceutical drugs out of their country. So at this time, so what do we do as Nigerians? The CBN will also be putting on the table to say, yes, we will now begin to look at our pharmacies and pharmacologists and say that it is high time they stop becoming dispensing people in hospitals. Then they will now begin to practice begin to do what they really studied in school, the formulation of drugs and the development and establishment of pharmaceutical industries will now begin to play a major part in our intervention activities. We will also be looking at the possibility for us to see to it that we reduce the drain of foreign exchange where we find people traveling abroad for common medical checks. We are going to intervene heavily in the health sector by trying to see how we could support the efforts of government to see to it that we develop specialist hospitals that can take care of diagnostics and also surgeries that would normally have taken our people out of the country and then a waste of our scarce FX resources. Indeed, the current oil price shock validates some of the measures taken by the fiscal and monetary authorities on diversification of the Nigerian economy. These measures, which have focused on improving domestic production of goods and services, particularly in the agriculture and manufacturing sectors, are necessary if we are to insulate our economy from volatilities in the crude oil market. We must build on the successes of these measures and reduce our dependence on excessive imports. Credit must go to President Muhammadu Buhari, who has placed considerable emphasis on diversifying our economy away from its reliance on earnings from crude oil. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I believe we can envision a vibrant economy in Nigeria that is less dependent on crude oil. There was a time in the 60s, our cities and rural communities were brimming with activities as industries sprung up in Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, Onitsha, Aba, to mention a few. Rural dwellers supported increased cultivation and export of cash crops, such as cocoa, palm oil, and cotton. These activities enabled the creation of jobs, not just for our rural communities, but also for our urban dwellers, while working to stem rural-urban migration. Our reliance on crude oil revenues beginning in the 70s was the advent of our problems in Nigeria. Oil rose from 3% of our total export earnings in 1960 to over 90% by 1976. Today, oil constitutes close to 80% of our export earnings. Our dependence on oil exports contributed to the massive decline of our local industries, indeed the death of our local industries, as well as our agricultural sectors, as it enabled an excessive reliance on the import of goods and services. This reliance on imports contributed significantly to the challenges we face today in not only agriculture, manufacturing, and other sectors, but more importantly, it resulted in the loss of jobs, opportunities for our country, for our people. Our craze for imports of everything and anything supported factories, firms, and creation of jobs in other countries, while we lost the jobs, while turning our industries into warehouses that received these imported goods. Today, the current leadership under President Muhammadu Buhari is working to deal with high unemployment levels, as well as the smuggling and dumping of goods into Nigeria, by putting in place policies that support increased production of goods and services, in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do not deal with these issues, the challenges of kidnapping and banditry would only just fester as those involved in these nefarious activities would only resort to these activities with intensity in the absence of job opportunities. Addressing domestic and external challenges to growth requires that we hear from critical stakeholders like you, who can generate great and workable ideas and solutions. We must all work together in order to harness the true potential of our nation. This one-day roundtable session will address some of the measures needed to drive double-digit growth in Nigeria. These include improving productivity in the agriculture and manufacturing sectors. Second, how to develop funding models that will support improvements in the quality of our energy and transportation infrastructure. Third, how Nigerians operating in the creative industries space, such as the ICT, can expand and capture the value of their works while creating jobs and generating export revenues for our nation. The findings generated from the roundtable session will be presented to President Buhari at a dinner later today. I encourage all of us to provide our inputs, as this will be vital in guiding the monetary and fiscal authorities on measures that will help in supporting greater growth of Nigerian economy. We therefore look forward with a lot of intensity to a very exciting session, and thank you once more for joining us here today. Thank you.
Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele there welcoming stakeholders to the second roundtable discussion on going for growth. It is on that note that I welcome you to this live telecast, the network services of the Nigerian Television Authority, reaching you from the corporate headquarters of the Central Bank in Abuja. My name is Onengiye Fineface. The CBN Governor has also set the agenda for conversations at the roundtable, addressing the performance of Nigeria's economy in the recent past, bearing in mind current global economic realities. Challenges such as the less GDP growth compared to population growth and over-reliance on oil, which has affected Nigeria's economy adversely, making the country susceptible to the coronavirus outbreak, requiring action to boost the economy in other sectors. In the wake of dwindling global economic fortunes, with the crude oil prices recording worst crashes in recent years, it has become a national imperative for policymakers to innovate urgent solutions to maintain balance with the nation's economy, and that is what this roundtable is all about.
Now, the elder statesmen today are people like Jim Ovia and Aliko Dangote. A round of applause for them. They are here to set the stage. Very briefly, may I invite Jim Ovia.
Your Excellencies, honorable ministers here present, Your Excellency, various state governors here present, Central Bank Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, CON, and his very able deputy governors. It is a very, very important and very official moment today that purely coincidental, just a few days after the Black Monday, that the crash, not only of the oil sector or the oil price, which we now know drives the world economy. And the expression or definition of crash, the market crash, when you hear about market crash usually, it's coined for the financial sector, for the financial markets, nothing else. Economies can crash particularly, but you don't refer to economies having crashed. It's the financial markets, which drives everything. Ladies and gentlemen, we do know that after Black Monday, all the world financial markets, Nike, New York Stock Exchange, and so on and so forth, London Stock Exchange, they all, Singapore, Nike, Japan, they all crashed. Worse than they had been since 1991, the Gulf War. So what does that mean for Nigeria? It means we are not insulated from the world global financial markets. We certainly are not. We now know we are part of the global market. In Nigeria, the Nigerian stock market equally crashed. In fact, the stock exchange had to stop trading on 2 occasions on the Black Monday. They had to reset trading again. This is very normal when there is unusual market crash. New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, Singapore, globally happened. That also happened a few years ago when the rupee, the Russian currency, also started to give way. They have to stop the market. So it had happened in Nigeria. What do we do? Now that we understand what the financial market is, so you could see why it's imperative and very important, the role that central bank, the apex financial institution, plays in the financial markets. Very important. It's not just the regulation of banks. Central bank of any country is also the custodian of the financial resources of the country. That is why when you hear Mr. Godwin Emefiele, central bank governor, speak, he does not only talk about banks. Sometimes these days he hardly talks about banks. He's always talking about agriculture, intervention funds for agriculture, intervention funds for rice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to say, many years ago, before independence and thereafter, we used to have granite pyramids, cocoa pyramids. Now, for the first time, under the current CBN governor, we now have rice pyramid. That is the role that central bank is beginning to play to boost and blossom the economy of Nigeria. I think he assumed the banking sector is solid as a rock. But is it really solid as a rock? I know the gentlemen in the front row, I'm seeing them, they are all nodding that yes. But let's also see how it could be sustained. In many ways, yes, I believe the Nigerian banking industry is solid as a rock, but we need to sustain them. One particular industry that we know in Nigeria here that we can look at as our own comparative advantage is not really manufacturing. It's not really agriculture. It's not really services. It is financial market, financial services, banking. Why is it a comparative advantage in relation to African countries? It is simple. Nigerian banks, financial services, had done extremely well. In 2004, before consolidation, all the Nigerian banks put together, I think the total market cap then was below 12 billion. And this is true. But today, and all of them put together could not even lend 1/10 of what the cement industries needed. They couldn't. But today, ladies and gentlemen, one of the top tier banks, tier 1 banks, any one of them is much larger than all the Nigerian banks' shareholders' funds put together in 2004. So that's a testimony that Nigerian banks are solid. We are beginning to export these expertise to West African countries, East African countries. Nigerian banks in Ghana are the ones that are showing the way. They did not even know about recapitalization until we taught them. That's a comparative advantage, and we should be proud of it. Can we do the same in other sectors of the economy? The answer is yes. Dangote Industry is also doing that in cement. They are there in Ethiopia. They are there in quite a few other African countries. But we need more of those champions. With the support of the central bank, with intervention funding in various areas. The only area that central bank think is so solid and he doesn't want to give much of intervention there is because they all think banks are making too much profit. I don't want to talk about this, but that's not exactly true. For the simple reasons that as far back as 1990, slightly before then, there was only one Nigerian bank that was listed top 1,000 banks in the world. Only one. Thereafter, none. And they were ranked number 999. Just 1 point to the last. But we were all happy. Today, ladies and gentlemen, Bankers Magazine, Financial Times, top 1,000 banks in the world, you have about 7 Nigerian banks listed. That's a success. However, if you now translate their shareholders' funds to the way the market was 5-6 years ago, in fact, occasionally, when I joke with the CBN governor, I told him, when he was the MD of Zenith Bank, we, Zenith Bank, was ranked the 6th largest bank in Africa in terms of shareholders' funds, and was confirmed by Bankers Financial Times. But today, the same bank that he ran so well 6 years ago is no longer number 6, it's only number 9. So how can we say we had made more profit since then? This is data, this is statistics. This is not a political statement. Check your records, they are there. So the important thing that we must continue to strengthen the banking industry and support the banking industry because it's a winning champion, a competitive advantage that we're beginning to export those talents, those skills, those knowledge to our other African countries. If your banks are solid and strong, your economy will grow, going for growth. The Prince of the Niger is always very creative in bringing these ideas that will put all of us together, going for growth. How can you grow the economy if your banks are not solid? They are not making they have to make huge profit. And this is the truth. In the US, banks are one of the most profitable entities there. If a bank goes under, it takes along with it many other industries. And I'm proud to say that the Central Bank Governor had announced many times, for those who care to hear, say, listen, that no Nigerian bank will go under his leadership. For which I congratulate him. For us to round up, just yesterday, after the market crash of Monday, the Black Monday, I had realized that a few days ago I received Economist magazine, and the front cover, some of you may have seen it, was the photo of coronavirus. And this time, so nicely done, they showed the world map and showed the cells of coronavirus pecking on the world map. And the title was The Right Medicine for the World Economy. That's a euphemism. Actually, more of paradox. Is coronavirus truly the right medicine for the world economy? It's a wake-up call. And of course, the CBN governor alluded to the fact that the country will have to do something, our own response. We might think coronavirus is not yet in Nigeria, but we also need to be prepared. We need to be prepared. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm running out of time. I have very honorable ministers here who are going to speak and tell us what we need to do to continue to grow the economy. The banking industry, they are doing their very best. Segun had talked about financial inclusion, to bring the unincluded into the marketplace, to digitize the economy. The only way you can do that is to digitize the economy. We are beginning to have agent banks. Central Bank is already issuing agent banking licenses. We also need that. And that will also translate into the banking industry. And the banks continue to grow bigger and stronger. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The banks are making profit. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed is very happy. They will pay their taxes. Another man who is happy is Aliko Dangote. May we have the privilege of inviting him very quickly. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed will have the last word after Mele Kyari. So let us invite Aliko Dangote. Clean your hands from corona.
Did you clean your own? Well, thank you very much, Your Excellencies, honorable ministers that are here with us, the Governor, Central Bank, and Deputy Governors, Central Bank, our CEOs that are here with us, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Well, as you know, with the crash of the oil price today, it is imperative that we diversify this economy. The diversification of this economy is very, very important. And in fact, we are late because, like what I said, since when I got to Lagos in 1979, people have been talking about diversification of Nigeria's economy. Diversify your economy. You have to diversify, create middle class, and also transform countries. These are the areas that I think we need to really focus on. But, how do you diversify an economy? And go into manufacturing that makes sense and also makes it inclusive growth. Then you need to actually do what you call backward integration or import substitution. Our economy is great because we have a local market. Because when you look at it, the economy of Asia is mainly focused on export. But we have a domestic market. This is a country with about 200 million people, apart from the rest of the ECOWAS market, where our imports last year was almost $47 billion. It is not sustainable. We cannot have 200 million people growing at an average, population growth at about 2.7%, and then we're importing most of the things that we're consuming. I think we need to really, this time around, be more serious so that we just don't keep talking about diversification. And it has been very elusive. I don't know why. It is possible, but people are not really focusing on that. So I think we need to really look at, okay, fine, how do we fully this time around, the kind of people that I've seen here, I'm sure we'll find solutions as to how do we actually make our country to be producing things that we consume. Because if you look at it today, with the kind of projects that we're doing, we're importing almost every single thing apart from few iron roads, which is a pity. We don't have steel industry, we don't have this. So entrepreneurs like my big brother here, Jim Ovia, you have to diversify also and leave a bit of banking. And come into a little bit of risky, but also a very good area, which is manufacturing. And I think what we need to do to make it successful, and look, I know you gave me 3 minutes, so don't worry. He's been going around me, so he didn't stop my big brother, but you're trying to stop me. Yeah, he didn't stop him, but he's trying to stop me. So, everybody is scared of Jim, so that's why. So really, we need to look at this. Are these things possible? We need to look at reducing of cost of doing business. Cost of doing business can actually affect everybody. To tell you the truth, government lost so much money last year in the traffic logjam of Apapa alone. We as a company, actually our 3 companies lost over 30 billion in terms of, profit, which also the government will collect less taxes from us. So we need to look at infrastructure, we need to look at power, because without power, there won't be growth. Because that is what will actually propel a lot of these SMEs to actually, be almost everywhere, in Kano, in Jos, in, Aba, in Port Harcourt, all over the place. But we need to really have power so that entrepreneurs can risk their capital and go back and reclaim their factories or, warehouses where people have turned their factories into warehouses and churches to now make them factories again. It is possible, it can be done. So the Is it impossible to diversify? No, it's not impossible to diversify. But there are quite a lot. We need three things. One, we need low interest rates, which I think we have achieved something like that today. Number two, we need long-term funds. Number three, we need support by CBN to back that up with foreign exchange. And I think my governor, that is governor of Central Bank, my advice is that rather than us to focus more on imports, we should reduce that and do like the way Ethiopia did. Ethiopia will give preference to people who will bring in machineries to produce rather than now importing to consume. I mean, at a point, my heart actually bled when I realized that, yes, it was announced by customs that, yes, our revenue, customs collected 1.35 trillion as import duties. It means that the economy is not working. If the economy is working, customs shouldn't collect that much money. We should produce more. In fact, it should be the IFRS that will collect that much money, not customs. So I think we need to really diversify and fully make sure that, yes, we have what you call manufacturing base where we'll produce whatever. You just imagine 47 billion, even if we are now going to produce goods worth 30 billion. Can you imagine how many jobs we'll be able to create? There will be quite a lot of jobs. And apart from that, people are saying that, no, it is impossible. No, it is not that it's impossible. You see, we need to make sure we make these things happen before it gets to a time where we will not even be able to, even with the money, you will not be able to, satisfy your own demand. Let me give you, for instance, today, can you imagine with the congestions of the port, if we are to import 27 million tons that we consume in Nigeria? Is it possible? No. But today, all those terminals that we opened, which we were importing cement, we have now built 2 terminals to export cement. And I can assure you, Nigeria by this year will be the highest exporter of cement in Africa. So it is possible. What are we doing going forward? What we are doing going forward was also the support of Central Bank. We've been able now, we are building 10 plants of rice, which by end of this year will be able to produce 1 million tons of rice. And we're also supporting the agricultural side. So that is on rice. On petroleum products, by the time that we start our refinery, Nigeria will be the largest exporter of petroleum products in Africa. For the first time this year, by the grace of God, Nigeria will be the largest exporter of fertilizer in sub-Saharan Africa. And that is all been possible by backward integration, which is the import substitution. We will be the largest exporter of, second to South Africa only, largest exporter of petroleum products, which is polypropylene, polyethylene. So you can see that, yes, it is possible, but we need to make sure that, yes, we have. But what we need is to make sure that we put up what you call government consistency in policies. And now we need to really look at all this support that's been given by Central Bank and Co. This diversification will not be possible without the support of Central Bank exchange for people to now